continual choice. Ben, just pretend like you're doing jumping jacks. It is a now choice. It's not something we wait to do later. It is a choice we do now. Now, and in a minute it'll be now, and in 5 minutes it'll be now. We know this filling is like a sail. It bears us along by the Spirit. We know this filling is like being permeated. It's like putting Nesquik in milk. It changes everything. It changes the way it tastes. It changes the way it looks, and it changes who will drink it. And we know that this is still another picture. It's like a glove. It enables and it controls. We know this. Doug, we know all this, right? Now we're smart. Now we're strong. Now there's some security, there's some safety. And this is important. Lorraine, I spend a lot of time trying to make sure I'm right. Trying to make sure I know some things. In fact, Miss Lorraine, if you want to argue with me, argue with the Bible. But Bill, if I'm not careful, all my value comes in knowing and being right and being strong. And as we begin to look at these consequences, we started last week. Okay, so the first consequence was he brings a song. I'm not supposed to start making song. I'm not supposed to start striving in song. I'm not supposed to start striving to give thanks. I'm not supposed to start striving to surrender and make sure every relationship is correct. And I'm not supposed to make those things happen. That's the opposite of being filled and led by the Spirit. That's me making it happen in the flesh. We're supposed to be weak. We're supposed to be dependent. This idea of being filled with the Spirit, and Brother Maddox, I might be way off base. But I just started going through these, I just started spending some time and looking at these results. And you know what I found myself wanting to do? Make these results happen. And that's totally out of context of this entire book. Justin, we just said, we know what? Everything points to this part, and everything changes here. Everything is enabled here. What makes all this happen? We went to the book of Galatians. It is walk in the Spirit, verse 16, verse 18. Walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. The fruit of the Spirit. What makes love, joy, peace? What makes these things in our life? I can't make love, and I can't make peace, and I can't make joy. These are supposed to things that flow out of dependence and surrender and commitment. It's out of my weakness that I'm strong. And here in this passage, before we go on, we have to realize, it is our surrendered. When we wake up in the morning, I must have time with God. That's where the strength is, and that's where the security is. That's where the song comes from. That's where the thankful heart comes from. That's where the right, loving, surrendered relationships will come from. But Hank, you and I, we can't make those happen. Now, last week we started this picture of the results. Verse 19, speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. And towards the end, Miss Lorraine, I got a little snippy or mocking. And I should not do that. And this is not in justification, but because I just shouldn't do it. But this area of song is one of the great contradictions of our time. It is one of the great places where personal preference comes in and causes such huge division. It is one of those places where, we have built the Colossians chapter 2, the vain traditions of men. And one of those we talked about, and I do want to just go through this quickly, because I want to get to the conclusion that takes us right back to that verse. Really where we should spend our time is in that verse. It solves most of the problems that we come to when we start talking about songs. But one of the things is it needs to be the old songs. Give me the old songs. Well, everything in there is he's going to give us a new song. What, new saved people can't have a new song? Now I will tell you, I love old hymnology. But old to me is 200 years. The church has been around a lot longer than 200 years. And there's been a lot more songs. And as long as it's going to be here, the Spirit of the Lord is going to produce a lot more songs. Okay, well, it just needs to be the songs of the saints. And look at their lives and look at what they look like and look at what... Well, I'm going to tell you, that's a walking, breathing testimony to the fact that it's the filling of the Spirit. When filled by the Spirit, there's a song. Anybody is going to get off track when not filled by the Spirit. When living in the flesh, it produces the works of the flesh. Galatians chapter 5 has a long, ugly list. And Ben, have you ever read the life of David, the greatest songwriter? Well, you see, music needs to follow the Western music style. Church didn't start in the West. That was, that was composed by those great European conductors, who, by the way, most of them were commissioned by the Catholic Church, and that's who they wrote for, and that's where they got paid for. Are we going to bring in any of the other things from the Catholic Church and claim it? There's just such contradiction in this area. It ends up being the excuse that's used by many weak to leave. And Brother Bill, what they do is they end up going for other weak, where that argument makes sense. And I've just watched that happen lots of times. I'm going to tell you, this verse deals with what we're really worried about. Verse 19, speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. And I desperately want to get to verse 20. So, Brother Hank, we're not spending a lot of time here, but there are some key points here. First, the music comes from where? It doesn't come talent and from performance and it comes from the heart. It comes as a result of being filled with the Spirit. When Paul and Silas were in stocks, at stocks at that time, they'd spread your legs as far as they could apart. Sometimes even had a screw to spread them even further apart. Great pain. That is when they sang. Let me tell you, that's not coming from performance. That's coming from the heart. And it brought the house down. It comes from the heart, and the singing is to God. Now, here's the key part. Speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns. Then here's the argument. And let me tell you, I love to argue this argument. This is a stupid argument. Don't use this argument. Well, if we're going to reach the world, we need to use the music of the world so that they'll come and think. Read that. Speaking to who? To yourselves. This music, our song, the Spirit heart-given song, Brother Bill, it's not primarily for evangelism. It's primarily for us. It's our song. If you're going to reach the world, you don't reach them through song. It's not its purpose. Now, someone might be moved by song. Okay? The joy and peace and security that's revealed in that song. The grace and mercy that's revealed in that song. The scripture that's revealed in that song. Okay, it should make him attractive. But it is primarily to God among us. It's not writing music for them. The music is for God, from our heart. And it encourages us. It's our worship. Now, hopefully that gets me out of trouble for being so mocking. Having these girls in here to tell me when I'm ugly and mocking. It's no fun. Verse 20. If you were in here, that's why I hate some of them. Verse 20. Giving thanks brings us to the second element. The first element, then remember the first element was us. It's inside of us. It's our heart overcome with joy and results in a spiritual song. The second is toward God. Giving thanks always for all things unto God and the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. The Spirit-filled, Christ-conscious, Word-filled richly, faithful, engine-running Christian gives thanks for everything. Eric, do you have Psalm 100? We're just going to go through this quick, son, please. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name. For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. Let me just do this one. Where's that? To pray without thanksgiving is to clip the wings of prayer. I didn't like that. But we enter into his gates with thanksgiving. It is the praise of our lips that brings us into his court. It has been said that the greatest act of personal worship that any Christian can show to God is to be thankful. The older I get, the more important I see gratitude and thankfulness as. Just think about this. Gratitude or thankfulness crucifies self. But it's not about me anymore. I didn't do anything. Gratitude exists in faith. Gratitude exhibits trust. Gratitude is full of praise. I think it recognizes that everything comes from God. Gratitude sees the sovereignty of God. In every hard situation, saying thanks is literally living out Romans 8:28. It is showing Job 42:5. It is understanding, Brother Maddox, it's understanding that in the place I'm in right now, there is purpose. And that purpose is, for all that I used to think I know, for all the place I used to think I was right, he is bringing me to a place where I used to hear about him with the hearing of the ears, but now I'm going to see him face to face. That's what he's doing. And it recognizes his sovereignty all along that path. That's the only way I can be thankful. 2 Corinthians 4:15. For all things are for your sakes. All things are good for Miss Lorraine. Everything coming into your life, he deems needed and good. That the abundant grace might, through the thanksgiving of many, redound to the glory of God. All things in Miss Lorraine's life are good. He's only doing good for you. And in that good, your thanksgiving is the means by which you give him glory for being who he is. That makes thankfulness pretty important. There's nothing in our life that doesn't revolve around this heartfelt, spirit-controlled, created, thankful heart. The ultimate expression to what God is doing in our life ought to conclude with thanksgiving. But Hank, when do we give thanks? Well, this is easy. I can be right. There's strength and power. I can be right. When do we give thanks? The verse says we give thanks when? Always. Always we give thanks. Rob, always we give thanks in our life. But the truth is, in my heart, I'm like, always we give thanks, but you don't know my problem. Bruce, always we give thanks, but you don't know my wife. Well, you do, so you understand my problem. You don't understand my job. You don't understand what a raw deal I have because I did it right. And now it's wrong. Always we give thanks. And Ben, the reason this is so important is because in that giving thanks, we recognize that God is in control, that God is conforming us. 1 Thessalonians 5:18, give thanks. This is the will of God. Brother Wayne, if you're in just the worst situation that you can imagine, and you said, Brother Jeremy, I just don't know what the will of God for me is in this situation. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Well, I can tell you one thing we're supposed to do. In that worst situation you can imagine, we're supposed to recognize it's for our good. We're supposed to give thanks. Man, how can that happen? How can we do that? Well, I took 10 minutes this morning to make sure we understand we can't do that. It flows from being surrendered and weak and dependent and full of His Spirit. Ephesians 5:17. Wherefore, be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. Ephesians 5:20. Giving thanks always for all things. Brother Doug, the will of the Lord is that we give thanks for all things always. It is His will. Shakespeare once wrote, how sharper than a serpent's tooth than to have a thankless child. Even Shakespeare knew that. To have a child who you're raising, who you're putting work into, who, Treva, you're looking at the end, and that sometimes causes conflict and discipline. No one likes discipline, and we don't like the discipline because we know it's going to cause separation, and you're sacrificing, and you're working, and you're giving to take that child and bring them and give them the best opportunity for life. How sharper than a serpent's tooth to have that child be ungrateful. Everybody understands that picture. But yet, we have a Heavenly Father who's trying to take us from place to place and to give us the abundant life. Justin, we're so tempted to gripe and to complain, and we make it so hard to give thanks. I just want to grumble and blame. Prone to wander, Lord. I feel I'm prone to grumble and I'm prone to complain. I think this idea of thankfulness falls into three groups. First one's the easiest one. Miss Debbie, we need to be thankful after a blessing. After there's a healing, after something is provided, after there's protection, it's right to be thankful. And that's probably the easiest. You can go to Exodus chapter 14 and in Exodus chapter 4, and we're going here on purpose because we referenced chapter 15 a number of times last week. But in Exodus chapter 14, those people were looking, and they were scared, and there's a noise coming, and Pharaoh's coming, and all his army's coming, and they're panicking. Now, honestly, I know this is from afar, but I would think when the cloud moved in to stop them, I would think they would get a little energy. I would think there'd be a little boost. But it sure reads like they're still terrified. God, stand still and see the salvation. Leads them across. Moses stretches out his arm. He leads them across. They get on the other side, which took a while. Pharaoh says, if they can do it, I can do it. Wrong. Moses goes, whoop. Lord goes, whoop. And immediately, after salvation, chapter 15, did I give you 15? Chapter 15, I did. Immediately after the salvation, they begin to sing. That would be result number one, the song. Then sang Moses and the children of Israel the song unto the Lord, and spake, saying, I will sing unto the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider, thrown him into the sea. I used to make up songs all the time. I can't sing that one. I don't know how that tune went. Preacher, you read through that song, and again they talk about the wonder of the Lord. They talk about he's going to reign forever. After the blessing, it was easy to give him thanks. It's right. It's natural. It's what we should do. The second group, and that's thanks before the battle. We see the problem coming. And we say, thank you for being in control. I know you're going to work this out. John chapter 11. Jesus gives us this illustration. He shows up late. The sister's all, he stinks. What are you doing? He says, take the stone away. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. Because when he's praying this, when he's praying this, Lazarus is still in the tomb. He hasn't, as you say, floated out. And I knew that give me the next verse. And I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. So Bill, there's a part where we need to learn. But you know how we learn. I just can't. This is not something you and I can make happen. We can't be right and make this happen. You know what we need to learn? That this will happen in our life when we surrender in the morning. And at 10 o'clock, and at 11 o'clock, and at 12 o'clock, to be led by his Spirit. We'll learn. We'll be strengthened in the inner man by his Spirit. Chapter 3, verse 15, 16. We'll learn to give thanks before the battle. 2 Chronicles chapter 20, and it's the whole story. We meet the king of Judah, Jehoshaphat, pretty good king, and he's about to get demolished. The Ammonites and the Moabites, those who were left in Canaan. Justin, they're just too strong. And so we see him in the beginning of this chapter, and he's just, Lord, you got to handle this. Just like you did for Moses, you got to do this because I can't deal with this. This is too much for me. I can't handle it. You've got to handle this. And then you can read through, and he gets his army ready, and he gets out to go meet them. And it's in verse 20. He talks to his army. He says, look, you need to believe in the Lord, because if you believe in the Lord, you'll be established. You need to believe in the prophets. Believe in what the Lord has said, because if you believe in what the Lord has said, you'll prosper. And then he gets ready for the battle. And I love this. He gets ready for the battle, and he doesn't call the Marines first. He gets ready for the battle. He doesn't call the infantry first. In Judah, when you get ready to go to battle, he gets ready to battle, and he calls the choir first. And he says, we're going to go in there with the singing of praise and thanksgiving. The thing that comes first before the battle is the praise and the thanksgiving to God, because he's the deliverance. And they go on and they march on through there, and they find out that God destroyed them all. In fact, in verse 24, there's a phrase right there that talks about they turned the corner and looked in there, and all they saw was a bunch of dead bodies. And no one escaped. And all the spoil was theirs. There's thanks before the battle. But now here's the toughest. And that's the thanks in the battle. And everyone is called to give thanks in the battle. Brother Maddox, I don't understand your battle. I don't understand the pain. I don't understand the weight. It's not my battle. You don't understand my battle. I have a battle. You don't understand the pain and the weight. But I do understand your God. And you should understand my God. And in that battle, I understand this. He deserves our praise and thanksgiving. We spent weeks. Why? Why, Justin? Because he's good. Because he works all things for my good. Because he's bringing me from point to point. Daniel. Daniel was a kid. Look at his life. A kid taken out and served and surrendered and blessed and blessed and blessed. And it just like never stops again and again and again. Battle after battle, challenge after challenge, time after time. And now this jealous group, this evil, ugly, jealous group. What was he doing? Good. What effect was it having? Good. And this evil, ugly, jealous group says, we got to stop them. And they get that ring. Can't praise anyone, can't give thanks to anyone, no prayer to anyone but our King. Middle of the battle. He doesn't even close the window. Just like always, before the open window, 3 times a day. It says in chapter 6, he gives praise and thanksgiving to his God. Right in the middle. Wow. Take him to the lion's den. Which I don't know, Daniel or Joshua. I have a hard time deciding which one is a greater book of just victory. Just thankful. Jonah. Jonah is not Daniel. In fact, Jonah, told by the Lord, led by the Lord, ran down. And I love that it's down. He runs down to Joppa. He goes down to the docks. He goes down in the ship. And he ends up going down into the sea. And in the sea, he has a prodigal moment. It doesn't say when he came to himself. It says, when I remembered the Lord, which is short for when I came to myself. Then, in prayer, he goes and enters his courts in prayer. And he gives him thanks. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it's like being awake in the belly of a nasty old sea creature. I don't know what it's like under that pressure. I don't know what it's like under that smell. I don't know what it's like with acid. I don't know what is protection. I don't know any of that. But I know in the middle of all of that, when he came to himself, when he remembered the Lord, he offered the prayer of thanksgiving. In Acts chapter 5, the Sanhedrin says, I'm tired of all these guys. We killed them, and now it's growing like wildfire. We tried to stop it. It didn't work. We're going to stop it here. You bring in his followers. Give me the apostles. They bring the apostles before him in chapter 5, and in chapter somewhere like verse 40, 41, somewhere in there, it says they brought him in and beat him. I don't think that's, stop. They were angry, they were jealous, they were fearful. Then they beat them. And when the apostles left, they were giving praise because they were counted worthy to suffer for his name. And they beat him and said, don't preach, don't teach, don't say his name anymore. Brother Bruce, when they were done, they didn't stop. They went house to house, constantly preaching and teaching. In the middle of the battle, this I got to say this. It's easier if I'm just talking to somebody. Preacher Wednesday night. Wednesday night I had to leave. So I watched Wednesday night. I wasn't watching you. Because my eyes were filled with tears when I saw a young teen girl learning to give thanks in the battle. And I saw Mama teaching her to give thanks in the battle. And no disrespect meant to you. I said to myself right then, the value of the church is to be encouraged by that thankfulness right there. I think I told you 2 weeks ago, best sermon I've heard you preach in a long time. In fact, I felt awkward saying it because, I don't want you to think, well, what have the others all been trash? No, it just was great. I just loved it. Best sermon I've heard in a year was a young girl giving thanks in the battle. Greatest worship any Christian can do is to give thanks to their God. It takes away the flesh, takes away selfishness. It anoints him for his goodness. It shows forth his glory. And when we are walking in the fullness of his Spirit, we will have a heart full with a new song. And we will not have a problem giving him thanks after the battle, before the battle, or in the battle. Because it'll flow from a heart of love for him. Maybe close in word of prayer this morning.